Thank you for joining a special edition of Tech Talk. I'm the producer, Lance Hart, and today we'll be talking about driving retail success. I'm going to turn it over to Justin Rice to get us started. Justin?
All right. Thanks, Lance. And thank you guys for being here today. As Lance mentioned, we're going to talk about retail today. Specifically, we have a special guest, Mark from Cisco. We're really going to dive into a couple different things, what retailers are facing, challenges they're facing on the business side, as well as marrying that with technology. But before we get going, Mark, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So Mark Scanlan, I am the global industry lead for retail at Cisco. That covers a multitude of sins. Strategy, go-to-markets, a lot of work with partners like yourselves to really increase the level of understanding of the industry, not just the IT components, but what does that mean to the business? I'm very much focused on the business side of the house. What matters to somebody who's operating a store or a distribution center and so on, and how we can support those individuals using technology.
Let's double click on that.
Okay.
When you're developing a strategy or wrapping around something relative to go-to-market for Cisco, how does that start?
Sure. So a lot of conversation. So talking with retailers around the globe, because obviously different markets care about different things, but understanding what the retailers care about. What are the challenges? What are their opportunities? And how that impacts their business. And really it's going from there and saying, okay, let's prioritize these. In some cases, you'll get a customer come to you and say, okay, we have this specific problem. We want your help to solve it. In others, it's a question of looking at the industry as a whole and developing what we refer to as use cases. So that's really an application of technology to a particular end. And we will go to market with those. You may have looked at Portfolio Explorer on the Cisco website. That's a public resource. And there's a bunch of sample use cases there that we've worked with specific customers on.
Okay. One last question for you then, John. I want your perspective. But as we enter the second half of the calendar year, 24, going into 25, what do you see? What does Cisco see?
Sure. So there's a lot of challenges. John's nodding. So labor is still a persistent challenge. Post-pandemic, trying to get all of the roles filled that traditionally retailers have had in the stores and distribution centers, that's still an ongoing challenge, which leads us to conversations about things like automation. What can we automate in the store to lift the load off the associate's shoulders and free them to do other more important things like interact with customers. But also there's the element of understanding the business operations. When we look at e-com, we've known from the outset what the customer behavior looks like, where they came from, how they entered the site, how they traversed the site, what they looked at, and for how long, what they paired with, different products, all of these kinds of things. We're very familiar with that. That's been very difficult in bricks and mortar. Typically, you've got a traffic counter at the door, which are notoriously unreliable. And then you've got your sales data that you're trying to work out conversion. But there are so many other things that happen within the four walls of the store and within the supply chain that they don't have visibility into. So IoT is very big right now, both in terms of the understanding, but also the automation piece throughout the retail operation.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of times, historically, through e-commerce, you're able to understand that customer journey end to end, from the point they enter to the point of a buying decision being made, all the way to how long did you look at that shirt, Mark, when you were online. and we don't we haven't historically had that in the brick and mortar, which we see a lot of things like cameras, sensors starting to drive a lot of that behavior. John, just give us an overview. You're working with retailers of all shapes and sizes. What have you seen so far in this calendar year and really into the future?
With meeting Mark today, as I need a cooler title. That was my first takeaway. Global head of. In all seriousness, there's different levels in retail, right? A big box store that's doing $1 billion in sales out of each location is different than, say, a quick service restaurant or things like that. And I think one of the things that can be a challenge as we look at what's the trend towards 25, what are the investments? And so we look at them as, it's a big enterprise because they look at the revenue that they have and but when you break it down to a buy per site and what's the impact, I had one time a quick service restaurant say, do you know how many more hamburgers I have to sell every month? That's how they measure that, right? And so I think as some of these things like automation, like AI, things that create a better customer experience is where does the budget come from for it? How do you start to drive, instead of spending, making 5 more hamburgers to pay for it, how do you sell 15 more hamburgers because you put it in? And so I think we're seeing it more as we move into the end of this year and into 25, a technology center of excellence being formed where whether it's an AI center of excellence or automation, marketing has more of a say and a budget than just IT. A lot of these business outcomes that Mark's talking with customers about how do we deliver aren't just meeting with the IT team anymore about technology. It's meeting with the business, getting business insights, and more importantly, getting business budget, not just the IT to help fund these things.
Yeah, whenever I'm talking to IT leaders within retailers, they'll bring a challenge. Hey, I'm being asked to investigate AI, as an example. Well, the first step is don't make this
big.
Don't make this just your problem in IT. Make it a business problem. Pull from budgets everywhere. Build the center of excellence. It needs to be. You need to have a decision circle rather than that being an IT responsibility.
Completely agree with you. When we look at the ROI for a technology project, I think the technology ROI itself to IT is generally relatively modest. Spend X and you'll save so much in support and what have you. But when we broaden that to a conversation about what's the impact to the business, marketing is always a forgotten part of the business. But how much is an impression worth? And generally, if you ask the right person, they can tell you, an impression's worth $10 or $15 or whatever it may be. Deploying this technology is going to make what difference to the number of impressions? We're even seeing it spread beyond that out of the store to the CPGs, so to the consumer packaged goods manufacturers. So they're interested in impressions on their particular brand. So you think about a cereal company, they've probably got 20 or 30 different cereals on the shelf in a grocery store. Which ones are the consumer going to look at, compare, pick up some putbacks on the shelf? All of that kind of information is really, really valuable to the CPG. So that can either be the CPG themselves deploying that technology to gain the understanding, or it could be the retailer deploying that and then selling that data to the CPG to pay for their own project.
Or charging more for top of shelf versus bottom of shelf and monetizing it. That we see that a lot with like smart shelf technology.
Absolutely. And do the same idioms still apply that we make assumptions about from 10, 15, 20 years ago? It's always used to be, eye level was the highest margin item, except for cereals. And then it's child level, because kids run along grabbing something and throwing it into the cart. Is that still true? We don't know unless you deploy people with clipboards to do random intercepts or observations in an aisle, and then they try and extrapolate that. If we've got hard data and analytics from cameras and sensors and whatever else, that is far more meaningful than those extrapolations.
And I think too, it's other subsets of data that weren't available in the past. So you talk about the person with the clipboard at the end of the aisle. Well, that person with the clipboard was a third-party marketing company you hired, and they probably went Saturday morning at 9 a.m.
Right.
What's the impact to the parents shopping without their kids because their kids are in school during the day? What's the impact when that's done after stopping home on the way home from work, stopping into the store and picking up, having sensors, having cameras that are always on, sensors that are always on, being able to collect day of week and time of day and week of month and all of these other variables that in the past it was just clipboard for 3 hours, yes or no, that didn't give us a full insight. Now we have a full view.
Yeah, and typically, pick any brand of store, they probably have multiple formats.
Yeah.
Which perform differently in different markets, just the same as marketing performs differently in different markets. So buy one, get one free will perform differently to buy two, get 50% off. Same math, but they perform differently in different parts of the country or around the globe. So similarly, those formats perform differently in those different markets as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think, retailers for a long time have done a nice job of getting point of purchase data, right? Through loyalty programs and all those things. The point of purchase data has been available, and they do unique things with loyalty programs, mailers, all those things. The non-point of purchase data, which we're talking about now, is using cameras and those sort of things to get more consumer data as they traverse a store, what they're looking at, that sort of thing, which is a far step beyond the cameras that we think of the past, or the sensors of the past, right? Where we talked about, you said something really interesting the other day when we were prepping, like it's really not loss prevention. It's, I think, would you say?
Loss recording.
Loss recording,
yeah.
That's right. So what we're seeing now, and I think through Cisco's technology is, okay, you have this analytic engine that can be used via a optical sensor or a camera, but it also can be loss recording, among other things. You can kind of use that as a platform to build on.
Yep. Yeah, and in that particular example, how do you move from that passive loss recording stance to active loss detection? Because right now we're recording thousands of hours of video and then expecting a human to trawl through it when they suspect something may have happened, and they may never even find it.
Yeah.
So what if we can correlate the point of sale data with the cameras, with high risk transactions, and be looking for suspicious situations, let's call it. So for example, a cash return with no customer present.
Yeah.
That's an easy one to catch. But there's all sorts of no customer present transactions that fall into that category that we can do that kind of detection. Oh, we see this transaction code, but there's only one person in frame. Okay, that's suspicious. Let's flag it. Let's package up the video and hand it to an asset protection professional. Yep. So now they've only got to look at a 15 or a 30-second clip of video with the accompanying data, not through hours or days of video. So again, it's around that automation and liberating associates to do more valuable things or do more of the same more efficiently, more quickly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And by the way, if you have any questions, please put those into the chat. We will respond to those either throughout or at the end. John, so the implementation of these technologies seems like a daunting task. What have you seen from, what's the, we talk about, people get skin knees a lot in deploying technologies. Like, what do you see in that world?
So I love, these conversations are obviously the most fun for me to get to go have, and I'm sure for Mark, and you get to go and talk about revolutionizing retail and AI and all these great, but at the end of the day, it's still the same old boring technology that really powers it. I need Ethernet switching. I need ports available. I need Ethernet cabling run to where I want these cameras to be. I need great Wi-Fi in the stores. And so it's that same kind of comes back to the infrastructure that we do need to deliver in the stores. And I think one of the problems we look at, Mark mentioned an ROI on a project and how do we fund it? Part of that is, what is my time to actually get it deployed and start realizing the value? And then how quickly do I have to refresh it after that, right? I mean, you can look at video quality of a security camera from 10 years ago versus 5 versus today, and it's crazy, the things we can start to pick out on video today that would have been a blurry blob in the past. We obviously have these business needs. I think it's pretty easy for retailers to at least understand what they have as a problem, right? And work with Mark, work with Cisco to go, okay, we understand and we're seeing that problem across the board, and here's the Cisco technologies we've brought to the table to help solve those challenges. Great, but I still need to, if it's a headache in one store, it's a headache in 2,000 stores or 3,000 stores. And that's where CBTS comes in, helping customers through our skin knees of running the project, building a tiger team to go and touch these stores after hours, to know, you mentioned different formats of the stores. What's the infrastructure? What's the core technology that needs to be put in place to start to be able to take advantage? We're starting to see it today with all the AI and putting in big, heavy GPUs inside of each store. We're building compute pods in the store that didn't exist before. So I think it's people and process that make progress. We're the people in the process side, not just from implementation, but through day 2 support and that end of obsolescence, continuing refresh every 3, every 5, every 7, whatever your business model is. But finding the right technology doesn't just install itself, right? And that can be a daunting task for a global retailer.
No, Absolutely. And Mark, you said something at lunch before we sat down today, which was along the lines of, well, the business doesn't care about any of that. Everything that John just mentioned, the business does not care, right? The IT team certainly does. It's necessary to make the technology run. So how do you, whenever you're talking with a retail executive, how do you marry those worlds together?
It's a balancing act. To a large extent, we want to take those technology concerns off the business executive's plate. So if we can go to them with a baked solution rather than components that we're going to throw together to make something happen, then they're going to be happy. They don't care, how many switches they need. They don't care about security, and it's not that they don't care, but they view it as somebody else's job. That's an IT issue. And it's understandable because their job's to run the store or run merchandising or whatever it may be. Let somebody else take care of their core competency and let me do mine. So I think that's the big difference, being able to articulate the value to the executive and say, don't worry about the technical back end. We'll work through that with IT. But it's like if you're going to buy a new vehicle. You may want the ultimate driving machine, to coin a phrase, but if you go into that dealership and they say, oh, let me show you some tires, and this whole chassis is awesome. We can put all of this together into a vehicle for you. No, you're going in to buy one thing, and that's the vehicle of your dreams or whatever. So being able to go in and position an end-to-end solution, say, don't worry about the technical detail. We can take that off your plate. But here's the outcome we can expect.
Which is where we shine, right? The CBTS Onyx brand is.
Well, look, as you go down the stack, right? Mark wants to tell the business executive, don't worry, not your problem. It'll be IT's. We want to go tell the IT, don't worry, not your problem. It'll be CBTS and Onyx's. We will be the ones, we'll go and handle that. I think back to one of our first ever retail deployments. You and I were still hands-on.
Yep.
We're recovering engineers. We used to actually do it.
That's right.
And we were doing installs at 4 a.m. Because we knew the impact. They opened for customers at 7 a.m. Store managers were getting there at 6:30 in the morning. Yep. And that impact isn't just, oh yeah, we know how to wire up a switch and plug it in. It's, we know that if we interfere with 2 hours of business operation, this store loses X amount of dollars. And so the same way that the business executive doesn't want to be burdened with the IT part of it, they just want the solution. We see that the IT team doesn't want to be burdened with the operational, project management, professional services, implementation, and then the day 2 support. Because again, what we find is understanding how retail really operates. For most retailers, they make their money Friday from 5 o'clock through, Sunday at 9 p.m. And for most people, that's where they don't want the phone to ring because there's a problem going on at work. And so I think it's about taking that burden and, again, delivering. The business has an outcome they want, they turn to IT. IT has an outcome they want, they turn to CBTS and Onyx.
And I think it's an ability to scale as well. Most of the retailers we deal with are anything from 1,000 to 20,000 locations. So how on earth can any retailer, again, core competency discussion, they're retailers with a great IT department, but the IT department doesn't necessarily scale to be able to deliver to that many locations, or at least not in a timely manner. You mentioned something before, actually. The time to value is really important. If you are going to be able to generate an extra $5 million in revenue per year for a particular retailer, how long does that retailer want to wait? Right. To start, actually realizing that revenue? And the answer is not a 1 to 3 year deployment cycle. They want it in the next 1 to 3 months.
And when's the PO due? Right. That's the other thing. I'm going to make $5 million in revenue, but I have an investment. Right. I've got an investment in $1 million to get to $5 million in revenue. I'll take that deal all day, every day. But is the $1 million due today when I sign it, and I don't start getting the revenue until it's implemented and actionable and how do we shorten that as well?
Absolutely. And there's also a marked move towards subscription type services. Sure. So we'll provide a sorry, I'm not saying we Cisco, but as a provider, we'll provide technology on a subscription basis. Therefore, you get to start realizing that income as quickly as possible, and we will just take that subscription. So it's net positive from day one, not having to wait a couple of months or 3 months to start seeing revenue coming in to offset that initial investment.
The whole idea of subscription and managing the life cycle of that, what you guys are saying kind of blends together with the streamlining operations. I was sitting with an executive recently for a customer, and they said, listen, I bucket my team's work in 3 buckets. It's either run, it's grow, or innovate. I need to find a way to make the run action as streamlined as possible, whether that's automation, whether that's outsourced work, whether that's subscription, get me out of the life cycle business. I need to offload my run so I can grow and innovate, because my margins aren't good enough. I have to innovate in order to be competitive in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
I do want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, so Cisco has put a lot of energy and effort around hybrid work. And what I see let's peel that apart for a second. Let's talk through things like contact center. Let's talk through things like employee productivity. What is the role, and this is really both of you, that Cisco plays in the hybrid work specifically related to retail?
2 main points. Mark mentioned labor. Labor. You can't talk to a retail. It's probably their biggest expense on their COGS, and it's the hardest to maintain, replace, grow, et cetera. So first off is hybrid work and being able to utilize customer experience, AI built into to voice into the different WebEx platforms and things like that can be a huge benefit. But secondly, there's this delicate balance. I always work with retailers through the lens of me being the customer. And there's nothing worse than when I need help and I call customer service and I'm getting the recording. Half the time the DTMF tones are coming out of band and they're not recognizing that I press it, or it's got audio and it hears my dog barking or my kid crying and it restarts the menu. And all of this on top of an already frustrated customer when I call in. But at the same time, I want to pay a great price. And the cost to do business with that company, if they had an army of full-time employees sitting there waiting to take that phone call. And that's where you have to find that delicate balance of how do I start to reduce labor costs? How do I gain efficiencies while not sacrificing customer service? And I think it's been very, very okay for a long time. And I think even the best enterprise customers that made big investments in it still work pretty good. I think that's a big change right now, the investments we're seeing with Cisco and the WebEx platform around AI and around the CX, the customer experience, and that kind of all-in integration between a UCaaS phone system and a dial plan if needed out of country, especially for our customers, and contact center and chat function, omni-channel, right?
Yep.
Some generations never want to pick up the phone. Some want to talk to a live person right now. And being able to meet the customer where they're at while gaining labor efficiencies without sacrificing customer experience, that's a tall task, and we're really happy to be partnering with Cisco to deliver that.
The meet the customer where they're at thing is key. You know, we have a retail client, and one thing that they talked about was, I would love the idea to know that someone started an order online. They didn't get what they wanted. I know who they are. Then they called me. They called the store to say, hey, listen, I was trying this, didn't do this, and I want to give them a personalized experience because that's a painful thing. That's a 2-step motion for them to complete the purchase. That's a painful thing. How can I give them a personalized experience? That is what we're really talking about here, is the customer engagement with hybrid work. And what do you think?
And whether you can divert those calls early in the process, again, to reduce the amount of back-end labor that's required.
Yeah.
As you dial in, recognizing my cell phone, saying, oh, I see you've got an order in progress.
Yep.
Is that what you're having an issue with? Yes or no? It becomes very straightforward.
Yep.
And if possible, the workflow has the potential to try and resolve that without you ever getting to a human.
Agreed.
Or send you a link directly back to your phone for the particular resolution task, whether that's changing a flight with your airline or whether it's an issue with a product in the store. So I think there's a lot of ways we can start to look at how we can divert those calls and take that load off of both the call center associate but also the stores as well, because don't forget, people are still calling in directly into the stores.
And there's still labor and
Absolutely. And typically, if you call into the store, you're probably going to get one of the most junior folks in the store who's up front answering the calls, who may not be able to answer your question or may have to run around the store to find the answer. What if we can divert that and handle that in an automated fashion, in a way that does not detract from the customer experience?
Yeah, so I just had this happen to me, and I will use this real example. You go on a website, you search 10 minutes, you can't find the help you want, so you call, and you get a 45-second recording. Did you know a lot of our help could be found online? And you listen to this 45-second recording to then go, no, still need to talk to an operator, and then tell us why you're calling, and then you tell them, and they're like, I didn't get that, because they don't have the right dialects, and again, that's getting better with AI. But I had my mortgage got transferred, a new bank, and the systems are messed up, and a payment didn't apply correctly. And I call in and I talk with the guy. He says it'll be fixed in 24 hours. A week later, it still isn't. I call in and it says recognizes my number, and they go, we see you opened a ticket on this date. We expect the resolution to be done by this date. If it's before that, and you please give us till that date. If you would like to stay on the line, press 0. I got exactly what I needed. I still had the issue. They knew I had the issue. They provided me an update, and it took 5 seconds, as opposed to listening to a recording for 45 seconds go, hey, are you stupid? You didn't need to call us. And that's how I take it when I'm upset and frustrated. And so I think getting that customer experience, that customer brand loyalty, a good experience. You talked about cost of an impression, meaning cost of a click or a view. What's the cost of a good first impression, an actual a good experience with that brand? It's 100-fold the $10 or $15 you talked about.
Yeah, and let's not forget, we've been talking about customers calling in, but there's also the internal help desk and support and HR and all of these other things that also require contact between, in this case, an associate and a human in the HQ or the contact center. So the same can be applied. If I'm an associate and my point of sale is playing up, I don't want to spend 15 minutes on the phone waiting for somebody to tell me to power the thing off and back on again. Right. So how much of that can we head off at the first contact?
Yeah.
That can, again, there's cost associated with every second of downtime. So let's get that point of sale back up, and to an extent, we should be able to do that through solid observability mechanisms as well.
Yeah.
Understanding through Thousand Eyes and Splunk, how is that point of sale performing, and take proactive steps to say, hey, this system is not acting as it should. Let's take proactive steps to get it back on track. So we're seeing more and more of that as well.
Yeah, very good. Next time we speak, I would love to have a whole session on observability.
Okay.
Thousand Eyes, Splunk, the maturity, post-acquisition, all those things. Would love, that'd be a great conversation. We've talked about a lot today. We've talked about hybrid work. We've talked about strategy within Cisco. We've talked about how you operate your environment. Give you guys both a closing statement. John, it's been a few minutes, and then we'll head over to you, Mark.
Yeah, look, our goal, if we do our job correctly, it's not just bringing our own experiences or our partnerships to be able to bring folks like Mark. When I talk with retailers, I always tell them, you focus on your business. We have partners like Cisco who focus on the technology, and let us focus on deploying that technology, running that technology, operating. And if those 3 parts, if we all do our job correctly, it equals a great employee experience, customer experience. I had a CIO of a retailer that we worked with for years, and he used to say, if it's not intellectual property, I don't want to do it. If it's not germane to my business, how I run my business, how I operate, a switch is the same for retailer A as it is for retailer B. I don't want to be in the business of managing it. If there's some custom software I wrote that changes how I want control of that, I want to hire a staff focused on that, not on Wi-Fi, not on observability, because it's not intellectual property. It's not germane to how I do my business. I don't want to focus on it. I want to focus on the things that I innovate, that I differentiate, that I iterate inside of my business. And then our job is to go, understood, well, what are you trying to accomplish? And then bring in folks like Cisco, like Mark, and go, here's their business challenges. Let's design technologies to help solve them.
Let's work the use case, like you mentioned.
Okay, great. Now we'll project manage it. We'll do professional services to implement it. We'll run it day 2. We'll optimize it. We'll create a path to continue to refresh this lifecycle management so you don't get back into this spot. And so it's a really fun place to be. Everybody kind of focusing on their core competencies rather than, getting stretched too wide, and nobody enjoys that.
Yeah. Thanks, John. And Mark?
I agree with 100% of what you said. I think the core for me is having a solid foundation and a platform for innovation.
Yeah.
Because we saw very heavy spending coming out of COVID, where retailers typically have a 5 to 7 year refresh cycle. It takes them a long time to update their technology, and a lot of them were caught flat-footed when COVID hit. They didn't have curbside, they didn't have home delivery, they didn't have all of these extra services that we now expect. So they ended up investing heavily in technology in a very short space of time, and now they're pulling on the reins rather than maintaining and growing that platform for innovation. So I think my big thing is keep current, ensure that platform allows you to be agile in your business processes, because heaven forbid it's another pandemic, but it could be any change in the business landscape or customer expectations that you need to pivot on to provide that service. Customers, particularly generationally, they're becoming more and more fickle. If they don't see or experience what they're looking for, they'll move. They'll go to somebody else. So you need to be able to keep that experience fresh, and that's all about having that platform for innovation.
Yeah, platform for innovation. I love it. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming today. Mark, thanks for traveling in. John, thank you for being here as always. This was a special edition Tech Talk with Cisco about retail. So Lance, take it away.
To learn more about how CBTS is modernizing retail technology, please visit cbts.com/retail. Thank you for joining, and take care.